in Hunger Games was an awesome responsibility. It felt like, I mean, it was.
Jennifer Lawrence has never been one to hold back. Throughout her career, she's been celebrated for her candid honesty and her refusal to play by the traditional rules of Hollywood etiquette. For over a decade, she's navigated the pressures of fame with a mix of blunt charm and humor, a quality that has earned her both admiration and criticism. She's been called refreshingly real by fans and frustratingly unfiltered by others. But either way, she's always been herself. That authenticity was on full display during a recent interview that was originally meant to spotlight her latest role and her process as an actress. The conversation began as expected, with thoughtful questions about character work and creative choices. But as the discussion deepened, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Lawrence, without raising her voice or even changing her tone, steered the dialogue in an unexpected direction. She spoke about the challenges of working in an industry where appearances matter as much as talent, and where some people rely less on skill and more on carefully constructed personas. Then, with deliberate precision, she described a colleague who she claimed had weaponized likability. A person who, behind closed doors, relied on manipulation, dishonesty, and betrayal to get ahead. Lawrence never said a name. She didn't need to. Her words were sharp enough to make clear who she was talking about. Within minutes of the interview's release, the public connected dots. The unspoken name was Blake Lively. Almost instantly, the internet lit up with speculation, debates, and commentary. For years, Lively had been perceived as one of Hollywood's most graceful, polished stars. But after Lawrence's remarks, cracks in that image began to surface. It was a rare moment where one actress's raw truth reshaped the narrative around another, proving again that in Hollywood, honesty can be the most disruptive force of all.
Really pushing the envelope and really inappropriate and raunchy.
Well, I'm a big fan of Mark Forster, and I just think he's such an incredible filmmaker because
The round table was set like so many others before it. 5 of Hollywood's most sought-after actresses gathered under soft lighting, cups of tea balanced on saucers, cameras capturing the interplay of wit and insight. For the first half of the conversation, Jennifer Lawrence was everything the audience expected her to be: sharp, magnetic, disarmingly candid without ever crossing into cruelty. She laughed easily, traded jokes with her peers, and spoke openly about her craft. But when the discussion turned toward difficult collaborations, something in her demeanor shifted. Her shoulders squared, her voice softened, and her gaze locked on the table in front of her. There was no hint of mockery now, no performative levity. Jennifer began speaking slowly, carefully, about how the most destructive relationships in Hollywood aren't the loud or overtly combative ones. They're the subtle ones, the smiling friendships that hide quiet sabotage, the public praise masking private betrayal. She told a story about working with someone who had perfected that duality. On camera and in interviews, the person showered her with compliments. Behind closed doors, though, the narrative was different. Jennifer described backroom meetings where her contributions were questioned, where creative decisions were quietly shifted without her knowledge, where support turned into erasure. She called it a masterclass in deceit. The words hung in the air, and no one interrupted her. Everyone at the table, and everyone watching later, understood the weight of what she was saying. She never used a name. She didn't have to. The coded language, the timeline, the subtext, it all pointed unmistakably toward Blake Lively. For those aware of the rumors that had swirled around a particular project, Jennifer's remarks weren't just revelations. They were confirmation. The project in question had been pitched as a landmark, a female-led psychological thriller with teeth, the kind of role both actresses had been waiting for. It was designed as a two-hander, a tightly wound character study about duality and resilience. One character was logic, grounded and razor-sharp. The other was intuition, fluid and emotional. Together, they were meant to explore the echoes of shared trauma through opposite lenses. On paper, it was electric. The studio hyped it as not just a movie but a cultural statement, pairing 2 of the industry's brightest talents, But almost from the moment casting was announced, things began to shift. At first, the changes seemed innocuous. Small script notes, little tweaks delivered by Blake's team. Minor adjustments, they said, to strengthen pacing or add nuance. But the notes didn't stop. Soon, the revisions grew bolder. Entire exchanges were rewritten. Certain beats vanished. Jennifer, whose character had initially been the emotional anchor of the story, began noticing her role shrinking. Her dialogue thinned. Key scenes that once centered her perspective were cut down or reassigned. When she asked about it, the answers were evasive. It was all part of the creative evolution, she was told. Normal growing pains of a script in motion. But it didn't feel like evolution to her. It felt like a slow, deliberate erasure, a razor slicing away piece by piece. What Jennifer didn't realize at the time, and what she later learned, was that Blake's team had been lobbying behind the scenes for a full narrative reframe. Their push wasn't just about pacing or tone. It was about recentering the entire story around Blake, transforming her character into the undeniable lead, while Jennifer's role faded into little more than a reactive counterpart. For Jennifer, who had signed on to a story of balance, of two equals sparring and surviving, the betrayal cut deep. By the time the cameras rolled at the round table, the damage was done. And when she finally spoke about it, calmly, without theatrics, the silence that followed was louder than any accusation.
Oh, I don't know. We're at a castle in Scotland.
The tipping point came when Jennifer Lawrence was handed a leaked email by someone inside the production team. At first, she didn't want to read it. Hollywood is full of rumors and half-truths, but curiosity got the better of her. What she found in that chain of correspondence between producers and Blake Lively's management stopped her cold. It wasn't about small tonal shifts or minor thematic tweaks. It was a blueprint for a full narrative pivot, one designed to place Blake squarely at the center of the story, even if it meant hollowing out Jennifer's role. The emails painted a strategy that felt as personal as it was professional. Blake's team argued that Jennifer's acting style was too intense for the current climate, suggesting audiences might find her overwhelming if she carried too much emotional weight. They pushed for the removal of several confrontation scenes and proposed new flashbacks that would deepen Blake's character instead. It wasn't just about emphasis. It was about restructuring the very spine of the film. What stung the most wasn't only the content of the emails, but the timing. Jennifer realized these changes had already been implemented. Scenes she had poured herself into, emotional arcs she had prepared with care, were gone before she ever stepped on set. She had filmed moments destined never to see the light of day. When she confronted the producers, she expected dialogue, maybe even compromise. What she got instead was a blunt reality check. Blake had final creative control. She had negotiated it into her contract from the very beginning. For Jennifer, the betrayal wasn't about artistic disagreement. It was about trust. The mask of sisterhood had hidden a power play, and by the time she saw the truth, the damage was irreversible.
Really pushing the envelope and really inappropriate and raunchy.
Well, I'm a big fan of Mark Forster, and I just think he's such an incredible filmmaker because
Jennifer Lawrence tried to finish the film with dignity. She showed up to set every day. She hit her marks, delivered her lines, and fulfilled her responsibilities as a professional. There were no public confrontations, no tabloid-ready blow-ups, no visible cracks in her composure. But as the weeks stretched into months, the quiet exhaustion began to show. Crew members later described her demeanor as detached and frustrated. Not hostile, not dramatic, just withdrawn. One lighting technician recalled how obvious the imbalance had become. "You could tell who was being prioritized," he said. Blake's scenes were res-hot over and over until they felt perfect. Jennifer's coverage, on the other hand, was rushed. If a shot didn't land, they just moved on. Entire shooting days were rearranged to accommodate last-minute changes to Blake Lively's character. Each adjustment added more screen time, more emotional depth, more layers that once belonged to Jennifer's role. What had begun as a film about duality, about two women standing as equal forces within the story, had steadily morphed into a one-woman showcase. By the end of filming, Jennifer knew the project she had signed onto was gone. And with it, her willingness to pretend otherwise. When the studio began planning the press tour, Jennifer quietly declined. No red carpets, no magazine spreads, no late-night appearances. She offered no explanations, only silence. Her absence was noticeable, and the rollout stumbled without her presence. The film's release came and went with little fanfare. Box office numbers were soft, reviews muted, the buzz practically non-existent. Jennifer didn't need to go public with her frustrations. Her silence was louder than any statement. When asked about the project in interviews, she offered short, vague answers. Sometimes she shifted the topic entirely. Behind the scenes, she sent a different kind of message: no more proximity. Not to Blake, not to her management team, not to any project framed as a co-lead situation where balance was promised but rarely delivered. Offers tied to the same circle were politely declined. According to industry whispers, Jennifer also spoke quietly with other actresses who were being courted by that same network of producers and creatives. One source claimed she reached out directly to Florence Pugh, advising her to protect her character early if she ever found herself attached to a project involving Blake. The warning wasn't dramatic, just firm. Trust, Jennifer suggested, should never be given blindly. When Jennifer finally opened up at the round table, her words carried far more weight than anyone expected. She didn't raise her voice or indulge in theatrics. Her remarks were calm, measured, heartbreakingly controlled. She spoke about manipulation disguised as kindness, sabotage hidden behind smiles. And while she never named Blake outright, the industry and the audience understood exactly who she meant. What followed was less a scandal than a reckoning. Other voices began surfacing: writers, producers, even editors who had worked alongside Blake and described similar patterns. Stories emerged of projects where the spotlight tilted subtly, where other actors' arcs were trimmed in favor of hers, where decisions seemed driven less by storytelling than by image management. Actresses began amplifying Jennifer's remarks. Florence Pugh reposted the clip with a caption about fighting for space on set. And Hathaway liked to post that read, "Being nice on camera doesn't make you kind behind it." Social media picked up the narrative and spun it into momentum. Headlines popped up with thinly veiled references. When collaboration turns into competition, the cost of working beside a queen bee. No names, but everyone knew. Blake's PR team moved quickly to counter the growing wave. Suddenly, glossy features about her balancing motherhood and career appeared in major outlets. Fashion blogs reposted her most iconic Met Gala looks. Paparazzi candids of her walking her children to school filled the internet. But the pushback didn't land. In fact, it seemed to backfire. Comment sections were flooded with references to Jennifer's story. Fans dissected old interviews and promotional clips, pointing out moments where Blake seemed to dominate attention, shift focus, or redirect energy away from co-stars. A viral Twitter thread broke down 5 separate campaigns Blake had been part of, each one with whispers of another actor being sidelined. Even traditionally celebrity-friendly outlets began raising questions. Entertainment news shows, which usually framed Blake as Hollywood royalty, wondered aloud if her charm had always concealed a sharper strategy. Blake's team declined to comment. And in that silence, the damage deepened. Jennifer Lawrence hadn't launched a feud. She hadn't waged a publicity war. She had simply told the truth, or at least a version of it. But in Hollywood, where illusion is often more powerful than fact, that truth landed like a sledgehammer. For years, Blake Lively had cultivated an image of effortless glamour and empowered femininity. She was the picture of modern Hollywood royalty, a doting mother, a red carpet star, a woman who seemed to glide through the industry without a misstep. But Jennifer's words cracked that veneer. What emerged wasn't a single betrayal, but a pattern, a system of control dressed up as collaboration, ambition cloaked in charm. Jennifer hadn't just exposed one co-star's maneuvering. She had exposed a way of working that many in the industry recognized but rarely spoke about. A way in which power could be quietly consolidated, where visibility equaled leverage, and where those unwilling to play the game found themselves pushed aside. Her remarks didn't end Blake's career. But they did something arguably more damaging. They stripped away the illusion. In Hollywood, charisma can open doors. Image can secure headlines. But when the curtain lifts, what remains is character. And in this case, the industry and the audience were beginning to choose which one they trusted more.